Hi, I'm Derek Ashong, and you are now in the stream. Today, diaspora power. What role do the 1 million Somalis living in exile play in their war-torn homeland? And one of the world's most controversial cyber activists launches a new TV series. Our digital producer, Ahmed Shahab-Eldin, is here looking out for your live feedback. As always, you can tweet him your comments and questions using the hashtag AJStream. Joining him on the couch today is Dr. Sadia Ali Aden, co-founder of Somali Diaspora Youth and the Adar Foundation, a famine relief organization. Dr. Aden, welcome. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Remember, you are community. You can stay in touch with us on the stream via Facebook. Like us there, and be sure to follow our news updates throughout the day. Before we jump into our discussion on Somalia, Ahmed has got a story from UR Community directly from Facebook.
Thank you, Derek. You know, usually we ask you to suggest stories to us on Twitter, but today this story was suggested to us by Mark Spizo on Facebook. Now, you've seen him at Occupy protests, you've read his leaked diplomatic cables, and now you might just see him host his own TV show. Julian Assange, the man behind WikiLeaks, arguably the world's most provocative publisher, announced Monday he will host a series of in-depth conversations for a global show launching in March. A statement from WikiLeaks reads on their website, Assange will draw together controversial voices from across the political spectrum, iconoclasts, visionaries, and power insiders. Now, online, many are already speculating about the show. Kevin Frey on Twitter jokes, oh boy, how will it start? And now for today's slice of top secret information, and some have even started suggesting guests for the show. A parody account of media mogul Rupert Murdoch tweeted this, quote, if you think Rupert Murdoch should man up and accept an interview on Julian Assange's new TV show, retweet away wombats. But technology skeptic Evgeny Morozov suggests Assange will struggle to book guests. He says Assange must have peeved off literally everyone in the media by now, so now he gets his own TV show to interview himself. Assange claims the series of 10 weekly half-hour episodes already has licensing commitments and will reach more than 600 million viewers worldwide. Remember, here at the stream, you can always share your stories with us using the hashtag AJStream, and perhaps wind up here on the orange couch in the stream.
Hi, my name is Amir Ahmed Nasr. I'm a Sudanese blogger, and I'm the curator of the Future of Islam in the Age of New Media, and I am in the stream.
The Somali diaspora has always been vocal in addressing the issues of their homeland. Take a listen to this clip.
First it was clans, now we battle nature. No helping hands, everybody wants paper. To see my people struggling, man, I can't take it. Through the pain and the drought, we just gotta make it. Hold on and pray for a better day. Dear Somalia, it's time that we make a change. And if we don't, our history will be erased. Can you imagine no more Somali race?
Now that was Kay, a Minneapolis-based musician highlighting the plight of famine victims in his native Somalia. The number of Somalis living outside the country is staggering. Recent estimates put the figure at 1 million, or close to 14% of the community. After more than 20 years of conflict and the recent famine, those numbers are growing. Let's take a look at this map for some context. Now, this is showing the Somali diaspora. People, as you can see, are displaced, spread out geographically. Some live in refugee camps in nearby Kenya and Yemen. Others have made their way to North America and Europe. Despite the distance, the diaspora's ties to their homeland are more than just emotional, as they provide much financial and political support to their families back home. But how much influence does the Somali diaspora have in changing the reality on the ground? Here to answer some of these questions is Idil Usman, a Somali journalist and author of Somalia to Europe, Stories of the Somali Diaspora. She joins us from Cardiff in the UK. Idil, welcome to the stream.
Hello, Derek. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. The first question that I would really love to get your thoughts on is, where does the Somali diaspora come from? How did people end up where they are today?
Well, originally the Somali diaspora obviously fled from the civil war that broke out in 1991. So many of them have come to seek asylum in European countries, as well as in the North American countries like Canada and the US. Many of them have also gone to Australia and New Zealand, and you'll find another diaspora group probably in the Middle East as well.
And what kind of influence does the Somali diaspora currently have? What's the interaction with the homeland?
It's very regular, I'd say. There's interaction on various levels, the main one being economic, because they are the predominant maintainers of family back home in terms of supporting them economically. As you can understand, obviously, there's a lot of poverty in the country due to the civil war that's still going on. So many of the people in the diaspora still have family members back home that they support. They're obviously in touch as well in terms of, that next of kin relationship. So there's an ongoing relationship that's going on in terms of interaction.
Ahmed?
You know, it's interesting. You mentioned that the diaspora plays a key role economically, and we see that sentiment echoed online from our community. Somali Thinker One on Twitter, for example, saying the Somali diaspora's remittances are a lifeline for the population back home that's currently threatened by the U.S. closure of Hawala banks. We also have him saying that they're more effective, these remittances, and they're quickly responsive to the crisis, unlike a lot of the bureaucratic agencies. And also, if we can get in this video comment on the issue of nationalism and the diaspora from Sam Ahmed. Let's take a quick listen.
I don't think Somali nationalism is actually dead. In a way, I think it's the opposite. People are waking up, especially among the young generation, with the mentality like, if we can't help ourselves, yeah, who's going to help us? And they're less concerned about clan allegiances or anything else, especially if they haven't seen the homeland and want to make a difference and go back. That's not.
So he's saying, Sadia, that nationalism is not dead, but also the other tweets talking about how they're more effective than some of the aid, these remittances from the diaspora. Is that true?
Absolutely. The Somalis have been heavily involved with the Somali crisis. Really, not only reaching out and helping their loved ones, but even a neighbor that you knew, you were able to send money. So using the remittances, they were able to send millions of dollars, as much as about more than $1 billion. But what we found out is the famine has been the most single unifying element for the Somalis in the diaspora, where you had it galvanize the Somalis from across the world. Somalis in the United States and Canada especially were fundraising on the city level, state level, and nationwide level. And we found out the Somali found organizations were much more efficient than their larger counterpart, more bureaucratic UN agencies like UN. And you could see, for example, when we went to Somalia, I went to Somalia with Adar Foundation, we were able to deliver about $30,000, buy the food ourselves by creating, sort of contributing to the economy there. So we bought the food within Somalia. And that also, when we put the food on the trucks, also the people, the drivers, where we rented everything. So basically you invested in them. You didn't buy the food from somewhere else. So that was the beauty of it. And you could see that we were able to feed almost 3,000 people with that money collected from Somalis within here in the United States.
So this is a really interesting point. I mean, if you take a look at my screen, I actually have a clip. This is from just an article I found online, and it's a person protesting. This is in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul in Minnesota in the US. And this image says, "I'm starving and banks block transmitting money to me." And Idil, I want to bring this to you. What's your perspective looking from outside the United States, but considering this dueling interests whereby the government felt some people were using the Hawala system to send money to fund violent groups like Al-Shabaab, while others feel that this is a crucial way of supporting the community back home. How do you strike that balance?
I think it's very difficult. I mean, on one hand, there's that need, obviously, to remain vigilant, given the fact that there's an ongoing conflict taking place in Somalia, and there's some radical groups that are quite active in terms of taking part in the conflict. But I think there's got to be a holistic approach in the sense that you don't affect the the remittances that are supporting so many millions of people, just because there might be one or two elements that, and this is by no means has this been proven. It's, it's something that the US is looking into, and they're anticipating that there might be support being sent back to these groups using these hawalet systems. I think it's something that needs to be done on a more comprehensive level, and obviously you've got to, for any problem to be resolved, it's got to be tackled from the root cause, and that is creating peace and stability within Somalia itself, and generating a political process where all these aspects could be taken care of. Simply cutting off lifelines that are for, that are supporting so many millions of people, given the fact that there's a famine going on right now as well, and the drought has affected them so badly, I think is really, it's very careless for the US to do something like that, in my belief.
Well, let me bring it back to you then, Sadia. She's talking about the need to address the root issue.
Yeah.
What should the Somali diaspora community be doing to address the root issues in Somalia?
The Somalis in the diaspora have been really pushing for the US to take the lead, and the international community as a whole, to really address the issue holistically, as Idil said. And to address it holistically is not just addressing the symptoms, but really attacking the disease itself. For example, reconciliations are held, but they're held for those, the warlords, clan leaders, people who have really already have committed crimes, and they're held in outside the country. What the Somalis is saying is that there has to be a reconciliation that's Somali found, Somali funded, and Somali run. And the Somalis.
But how is that possible with the lack of infrastructure?
Well, because it's actually possible, because in Somalia there are two regions that are peaceful: the northwest, known as Somaliland, and the northeast, which is the Puntland. They are stable, because when the clans came and militias, and they toppled the Somali central government, the ones in the north were able to bring peace, stability, but the ones in the south really failed, and also until today they're still struggling. So what they could have done is what we suggested and argued in different forums, to take the reconciliation to the north and allow the brothers and sisters in the north to host that reconciliation. Somalis are capable of finding peace and sustaining. Also, Somalis in the south have done it. This Union of Islamic Courts, they brought 6 months of semblance of peace. But because the neighbors did not like it, US had to give a tacit support to Ethiopia to invade December 2006 and crash that Union of Islamic Courts. The Somalis are capable, they just need to be given the opportunity and the time and the space.
Well, Somalis are definitely very vocal, and I have a lot to say on this topic. What are we hearing from the community?
Yeah, it's true. You know, Derek, we spoke about the economics, but a lot of people are pointing out the political aspects and the role the diaspora plays. For example, again, Somali thinkers saying the Somali diaspora's role in politics is a very positive one. They provide the largest chunk of technocrats that run government ministries. And we talked about this earlier. Even they're saying that, you know, since 2000, they've increasingly played major roles in politics. But a lot of people are still bringing up the idea of the international community, or the failure that they see. For example, Mustafa Rabic saying Somalia is not a failed state, but a forgotten state, because the so-called international community has no interest politically or economically to get involved. And let's listen in to someone expanding on this, a video question that came in.
Hi, I just want to know, what's the international community doing about Somalia? Now there's Kenya in the country, there's Ethiopia in the country, creating more people to flee their cities, their villages, more people going into neighboring countries, which they don't mostly understand the language and can't live in. What are they doing?
So he asks Idil, what are they doing? He references Kenya, Ethiopia, but also the international community. Are they doing anything effective?
I mean, it's a yes and no kind of answer, really, because on one hand, yes, there's a lot of involvement, positive involvement, in the sense that there is largely on a humanitarian level, there's a lot of going on in terms of the UN and different NGOs being present on the ground, predominantly in Mogadishu, and then obviously in Dadaab in the northeastern region of Kenya, and Kakuma as well. There's a lot of there's a lot of help that the international community is providing to those that have fled to the camps in Yemen, for example. But that being said, the need far supersedes what the international community is taking care of at the moment, especially now that, you know, the famine has broken out towards the end of last year, I think a lot of fundraising has taken place. But then again, there was a lot of complaints that the international community was bringing forward in terms of having security issues when it comes to accessing those areas that have been affected largely or the largest by the famine. So because there's those sort of bits and pieces that aren't being constructively taken care of, the need is still superseding.
Forgive me for interrupting you. I'm sorry, I kind of asked two questions there, and I probably shouldn't have done that. But what do you make of the comment of most of the people serving in the government or running the ministries being from the diaspora or being the technocrats that came from outside? Do you think that's the right way forward? And is it true?
There is a large group of the technocrats that have gone back from, that are educated here in the West, predominantly in the UK and the US, that have gone back and joined the current TFG. I think in general terms, it is a good and positive move that, there is a Somali, because like Saadia said, there needs to be a holistic approach and consensus that comes together from the Somali, from the Somali people themselves. It's got to be a Somali solution, given the fact that it's a Somali problem.
Well, I want to actually jump in on that, because there is, granted, it is a Somali problem, but there's the argument being made that Somalis in the diaspora may be contributing to the problem. One of the examples that's been given often is the actual recruitment by Al-Shabaab of Somalis living in the diaspora. And we've seen in the United States and in other countries, young men that have gone back and have gotten involved in the conflict. One of the interesting points that's been raised, very intriguing from our perspective as a show, folks, in social media, is that of the Twitter account at HSM Press, which is basically being engaged in a verbal conflict with other forces on Twitter. And people have looked at this and it says, okay, this HSM Press is an Al-Shabaab account, but the way they use the language would indicate that it may be run by a Somali in the diaspora. So Saadia, what do you think? The US government is saying they have the right to shut it down. Should that account be shut down?
Well, that's a tricky, because there's always the question of freedom of speech. But like I always say, with freedom comes responsibility. So if the account is actually creating more problems for the diaspora, because that is creating a dilemma for us, then of course there should be some restrictions. I'm not saying it should be shut down completely, but there should be some restrictions. If they're spreading hate, spreading that this is a exotic, or exciting mission to join, then of course the government should get involved, and it can get involved. And I'm surprised they're saying that Twitter is not taken down. U.S. government has the right and the power to take it down when they want to take it down. So why are they sustaining it? That's really the question that we need to ask, instead of saying maybe the diaspora has something to do with it.
So Idil, how would you respond to that?
I can jump in there.
Yes.
Derek, you see, the main problem here is not whether there's a Twitter account or if there's, because if you close down Twitter, they're going to open up a Facebook page, they're going to open up YouTube, they're going to, there's so much platforms these days that they have access to. The solution does not lie in shutting these, platforms down. It lies in resolving the problem that's taking place on the ground itself. We're going back to the conflict and the root cause that needs to be eradicated, because we can go round and round all day in circles getting rid of Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts, but really and truly that's not going to solve the long-term issue that's been going on in Somalia.
Well, let's get to what people are saying to us on Twitter.
Yeah, and Derek, you're right to point this out, because for example, AQ Nabadoon on Twitter is saying, one other perspective about the diaspora: the main problem for Somalia is now coming from the diaspora. Young Somalis are coming back to fight instead of rebuilding their country. Now, before I let you comment on that, there's also another tweet, Opinionated Hijabi, saying, Somalia's diaspora in Portland, Oregon has a great community. They run stores, a masjid, a local MSA, but they had big trouble last year. I think referring to this article here in 2010 of when the feds arrested a Somali teen in this bomb plot. So what do you make about the role of the diaspora in terms of going back not just there, but also within the U.S. in terms of to fight this, whatever they call it, jihadi wars or this war? What do you make of this?
Well, as someone who has medical training in medicine, in order to be able to treat the patient, you have to know the history of the patient. what we believe as the diaspora and the Somalis inside Somalia is that Somalia has been misdiagnosed. People don't really want to address the real disease of the Somali crisis. And what the international community is contribute here and there, and at the same time throw the responsibility at the Somalis. Somalis are guilty in so many ways. They have created the problem themselves by overthrowing the only government that they had, when they could have just created a movement that peacefully removes the government. So that we cannot deny. But we cannot blame what's happening on Somalis, whether they are in the diaspora or inside Somalia. What you're talking about, the youth that has gone to Somalia, they're alleged to be about 24. What we're talking about is 24 out of 150,000 people. So how could they overshadow
These 24 are alleged to be
gone to join Shabab. Yeah.
Right, okay.
And that was at the time when Ethiopia invaded Somalia. So that's why I say history is important and that we put things in context, because when they left, it's not that we're justifying, but when they left because Ethiopia was committing crimes against humanity. A massacre has taken place in Mogadishu. Over 23,000 people were killed. And Somalis, they're not like any other countries. They're not like tribes, they're clans. They're one tribe. So everyone is really interrelated and interconnected. And every Somali in the diaspora has a family inside Somalia. So when Ethiopia invaded, really, it invaded the heart and the mind of every Somali. And this is what people need to understand. And another thing that I want to say is when they left, and this is alleged, that they're not saying that it's not proven that they really went. But when they went, whether that's true or not, we don't know. They didn't leave by majority. We're talking about 24. That should not overshadow the citizens who are law-abiding, hard-working American citizens who love this country.
Well, Ahmed, if I can add my 2 cents to that, I think Saadiya's illustrated it wonderfully. One other element that I think is a contributing factor is the identity crisis that's going on quite rampantly within the youth when it comes to the Somali diaspora. A lot of them, and this is something that probably Al-Shabaab is tapping into, a lot of them feel conflicted between their different identities, whether they are Somali or Western or Muslim. And the fact that they haven't quite figured out that they can be all these quite comfortably and feel confident in that kind of puts them in a position where they feel they have to be either Muslim or they have to be Somali.
So on that point, Idil, I actually want to hold that point and come back to it in the post-show of Somali youth identity. Idil, Sadia, I want to thank both of you. Right now I want to get to Ahmed, who's got some of the leads that the stream is following.
Thanks, Derek. We start with a disturbing video of blood streaming into the streets in a northern Polish town. News reports said the overflow came from a meat processing plant and seeped into the streets when a sewage drain got blocked. A police investigation is underway. Now, next up, on Monday, India became the world's 6th country to operate this nuclear-powered submarine. In a $1 billion deal, Russia agreed to lease the submarine to India for 10 years. The INS Shakra, which is what it's called, will operate in the Bay of Bengal and is part of India's effort to strengthen its naval military capabilities. And our last lead, Wednesday marks the 1-year anniversary of the Egyptian Revolution. As activists return to Cairo's Tahrir Square claiming that their struggle is far from over, we are going to be talking to journalist Sharif Abdel Quddus about the country's transition. And here's the question we're posing to all of you. Was the Egyptian uprising a success? You can go to our website right here, and on the right, you see right there, it says Your Voices, and record your comment for us here at the stream. Derek?
Ahmed, well done. And thank you, Ahmed, Sadia, and Idil. There's one more tweet that we want to share with you that actually came in from our community. Do you want to read that last one?
Yeah, it's worth
Ahmed?
pointing out, we don't want to be too self-referential, but Muhammad on Twitter saying, loving the fact that we got 2 Somali women discussing the problems in the Somali diaspora.
Okay, well, we're going to continue the conversation with you. Thank you, Doctor, very much for being with us. We're going to be with Dr. Aden and with Idil, as well as with Ahmed, of course, and you, our community, at stream.aljazeera.com. On Wednesday, as Ahmed said, we're looking at Egypt a year after the January 25th revolution. Remember, you can stay with us and tweet us about all of these topics using the hashtag AJStream. Right now, join us at stream.aljazeera.com for the post show. We'll see you online. Hi, welcome to the Post Show. We're going to continue our conversation about the influence of the Somali diaspora on events now going on in Somalia. And I want to come back to our guest Idil in Cardiff and talk specifically about this question of Somali identity. You made this point just before we went off of the air about the conflict within the identities of Somali youth. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Derek, the main issue is I think the fact that the youth are growing up. I mean, many of the youth today are either born here in the West or they have come here at a very young age, meaning that those that are now in their teens and 20s are, you know, pretty much as Western as it gets. But obviously at home, they have a Somali household and their heritage is obviously of Somali roots, and then their religion is Muslim. So when it comes to the environment that they're dealing with, they find themselves to be in a in a far more Western environment. And then at home they have a Muslim upbringing, a Somali household, which is often quite traditional. So and the fact, because there's no awareness raising, or I think maybe this is something that the diaspora community themselves can probably take an active lead role in it, in terms of generating this awareness amongst the youth that they can be Muslim and and Somali and Western at the same time. The fact that they are a new culture, a new generation that's coming up, that has sprung about of the civil war, basically.
So
I think
actually,
this is something that's quite an issue that needs to be addressed, and this will obviously contribute to the larger scale of eradicating the symptoms that have come out of the civil war.
Dr. Adnan, I actually want to come to you with this because you do work with the Somali youth group. And I think that some of these issues, these questions of identity, are actually salient for immigrants from all over the world as we're in this increasingly globalized community. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, what are some of the challenges that the Somali youth face in the diaspora? Do you feel that the communities in the US and Europe, et cetera, are welcoming?
Thank you for asking that, because what we're doing right now is the Somali diaspora youth that I co-founded. But it's really the youth that runs. We just support, where we're trying to nurture a leadership, youth with leadership qualities who are able to train other youth. And I just want to put this out there because I don't want it to seem, because 24 youth have left here allegedly and went to Somalia, that it overshadows the good the youth is doing all over the world. And when the famine took place, or it was announced July of this year, last year, the youth from all walks of life have really fundraised. They did, marathons. They walked. They did fundraisings. They did car washing. Adar Foundation has received over $4,000 from youth based in Ohio who did just car washing for a whole weekend. And another youth, also Ohio State students who are come together, they gave another $4,000. So the youth really are doing a lot of good. And true, there is an identity crisis, but the identity crisis is not only because the problems that they're having, but also the society that they're within is not really supporting. Because you have, for example, 2,000 or more young men in the jails of Minnesota, which is something that we don't talk about.
2,000 Somali men,
if not more, yeah.
Wow.
Who committed either petty crimes or who are mentally ill because of the trauma from the conflict where they have been to, and there is no way to address that.
Yeah.
So the community is suffering in so many ways, but really when you see the community is doing so much good here and inside Somalia. True, the crisis there, the identity crisis there, but there are so many things that we're doing as a community, and the Somali diaspora youth is one of them, where we're organizing and helping them collaborate. For example, our first conference, 2009, we had a young girl who decided, college student who decided to establish an organization called Mercy to Mankind. They run in Mogadishu a camp to take care of the orphans. So the youth is doing a lot of good, and the older people are helping, but there's no much support from outside. Really, the youth, the community is funding those initiatives.
I want to get Idil's thoughts on this, because we did a story earlier in this year during the time of the riots in London about some of the grievances felt by young people there. And one of the issues that came up was the stop and search policy that's implemented in a lot of the minority, the black and immigrant communities in London, as well as this Operation Trident, which is focused on researching specifically African and Caribbean gun crime. So there were these questions of racialization of justice in the UK. I'm curious, what is the experience of Somali youth in particular in the community in the United Kingdom?
They fall in the same bracket as the African Caribbean community and the Muslim community at large, Derek, in the sense that they are very much, they do feel that they are stigmatized, they feel that they are being stereotyped. And the thing is, because they fall in both the black community's category as well as the Muslim community's category, it's like almost they're getting a double hit. So especially when it comes to allegations of terrorism and things like that, there's quite, there's many families that I've personally have spoken to and that I'm aware of who have had police coming into their houses in the wee hours of the morning without any announcement or prior notice or anything like that. And obviously these are grievances that they feel that they can't do much about because many of them don't have a thorough understanding of how the system works, particularly the legal system, and the police and the larger justice system in general are not really doing much in terms of letting people know about their rights and their responsibilities and what the procedures that they can follow, what the police is allowed to do to them and what they aren't allowed to do to them. In a sense, it's almost like they're being stereotyped, and at the same time, the fact that they haven't got a comprehensive understanding of how the British system works is working at an advantage of the law, the law agencies that are kind of using it in their advantage. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed, really.
Ahmed.
Yeah, it's interesting with regards to this discussion we're having in the post show about identity and living in the West and being part of a diaspora. We have a tweet from Muslima B on Twitter who says, religion has become more important for Somalis. It was a secular country where the hijab was banned, but now it's totally different. Now, I guess we'd be remiss, since we have two Somali women here with us, you both wear the hijab. I mean, what is this about and what role? No, but honestly, like in terms of your identity, one of the struggles I think that people find is when they're living in the West that perhaps, you're targeted or people have misconceptions. So is this true, this tweet, to begin with? And how has wearing the hijab come into your own personal identity as Somalis in the West?
Sure. Well, the hijab or the scarf was never really banned. It was not institutionalized banned. But in Somalia, the people did not wear much of the hijab. But there were times when the girls in school, the principal or the person who's running the school would remove the scarf of the girl. So, but it was not something that was institutionalized, that if you wore it, that you were going to get arrested. So that did exist, but it was not really something that was within the institutions of the government. So it was never really banned. It was never like what we have seen in Turkey, where women could not wear the scarf in the public.
Would you call it a secular country, as she did?
It was not so much of a secular. It was their own way of not
Right.
religious, but not secular, but more of a cultural. Yeah, and the Somali culture is really a bit different. For example, the woman is not supposed to cover her hair until she gets married. That's the Somali culture. Where the Islam,
Right,
once you
slightly.
become
Derek,
yeah. Go ahead.
Idil, go ahead.
If I
Jump
can
in.
jump in, since the Somali community have come out to the West, one of the things that have, one of the phenomena that has grown out of it is that they've become very aware of their religious identity. Many of them who weren't exactly practicing back home in Somalia have become practicing, and they've ensured that they've taught their children Islam and how to be a Muslim, and as a result, many of them have become much more aware of their religious identity, and they've become practicing Muslims, which is why you see many of the Somali communities, both here in the UK and Europe, as well as in North America, wearing the hijab and being conscious of their Muslim identity. Having said that, there is obviously that conflicting nature of some countries here in the West, particularly Europe, when you look at France and Belgium and Switzerland, where there is, and Holland as well, where there's that push to assimilate, meaning in order for you to be fully integrated into this country, you've got to get rid of your old beliefs and traditions, and you've got to take our culture completely on board. And that's something that's become quite a friction within the Muslim community at large, and obviously affecting the Somali community on a specific level. I mean, when I was co-editing the book that I wrote, Somalia to Europe, many of the reasons why the Somali community that I've spoken to, who have fled from European countries such as Holland and Sweden, and they've come to the UK, was exactly that. They were seeking social tolerance with the freedom to practice their religion, and
Well,
many
let
of
me
them
just
have
ask
found
you a
that
quick
here.
question about that, Idil, because some of these countries like Holland and Sweden, I mean, they're renowned around the world as havens of tolerance and free expression. So what's happening there for members of the Somali community?
What's happening is that they've become a lot less tolerant than what they used to be, particularly probably in the last 10 years or so. There's become a popularity has come about of the politicians that are more right-wing and that consider Islam to be an extremist religion. So they've garnered a lot of support for themselves. And then obviously there was the film that came out. I don't know if you're aware of it, some years ago, of the guy who afterwards got killed, Teo.
Yes.
And the film that was, Fitna, that was portraying. I mean, the Muslim community obviously considered that to be a huge offense to their religion, and obviously some of them have reacted in a way that was counterproductive. But having said that, it nevertheless it translates of the issues that are facing the Muslim community when it comes to them being accepted in the Western society.
Idil, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much very much for being with us. Dr. Adnan, thank you as well. And Ahmed, thank you for getting our community involved. And thank you for joining us in this conversation. As always, we're going to continue online. You can use the hashtag AJStream to stay in touch with us. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you online.